Welcome to the ECE Classroom podcast with your host, Susie Beghin, inspiring early childhood educators every day. Hello and welcome to the ECE Classroom, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of early childhood education, parenting tips, and creative learning strategies. I'm your host, Susie Beghin, and today I have a returning guest, Miss Amanda Da Costa,
Hello,
joining
everyone.
us. Welcome.
Thank
She
you.
is a manager at Alpha's Discovery Kids Preschool and Daycare at our Oakville branch, and she has a wealth of knowledge in our topic today. And I know that our listeners are going to get a lot of insights from you today. So thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be returning to this podcast. I'm so excited for today's show.
Excellent. So before we jump into the topic, could you tell me a little something about yourself? Maybe share with me what drew you to the field of early childhood education and what inspires you to work with children.
I love this question. I think it's probably one of my favorite questions. So when I started, thinking about what I want to do with my life, originally I actually wanted to be a comedian and I wanted to work on a comedy show. And I kind of pursued the dramatic arts. And I wasn't really sure about how that would kind of transpire in a practical setting. And I had a little brother who's 14 years younger than me. And when he was born, I realized wow, I can really connect to younger children. And I found so much passion in just being there for kids. And then I started realizing that, my humor is not for everybody. And I found that it was really difficult to kind of connect with adults. But one group of people that always found me fun and funny was children. And I think that their little hearts, when they smile and when they laugh and when I feel that love and connection with them, I think that is what inspires me every day. That's what keeps me motivated. And I stay in this field because I love seeing the progress that these kids make and the relationships and connections that I can make with them.
Yes, and that actually works well into what we're going to be talking about today. Our topic is all about embracing your silly side, and that's close to me as well because I have a lot of the same experience as you, where I went into this because I love entertaining children. I love, being silly with them and embracing my what I call inner child and really get silly with them. So today we're going to be talking about embracing your silly side, and then we're also going to be talking about the importance of songs and singing throughout the day in a childcare environment. And I think the two are related. So I like that we're talking about these two things. So let's start off with, why do you think it's hard for adults, and particularly educators or parents, to tap into that silly side and let go of themselves?
I think as we age and get older, I really feel like people just kind of carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And I think as educators specifically, I think for them, it's a lot about they're thinking about the to-do list. What's next? What else do I have to do? How do I make sure that this is complete? And they're juggling, challenging behaviors or, parent concerns and demands and, all of that kind of getting juggled, it kind of can feel serious. And that's kind of where people kind of lose the focus of why they're working with children. And I think even for parents as well, you're juggling your daily life, your work schedule, the demands of the home, your marriage or relationship that you're in. And it always comes with good and bad. And sort of juggling that is you almost forget that being a child is about exploring and enjoyment and embracing the positive environment. And I think that, a lot of educators lose sight of why we need to be silly and why it's so important to no matter what you're doing in the field.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think sometimes it might have to do with judgment as well, where people feel judged if they act silly or, they're afraid of that somebody's going to think differently of them because they're, embracing that silly side. So maybe it's sometimes a little bit of fear that, being judged by your peers or others, that you won't, tap into that. So maybe that's part of it too.
That definitely could be. And I would love to like challenge listeners on this podcast who might feel that fear or feel that way. Take it from somebody who's kind of always silly. I will say that the parents will judge you more or people will judge you more if you're more serious, because when you're showing how much you love kids and why you're here and why you do the things you do every day, you'll get such a positive response. And, all that fear of judgment just melts away because that's what people want to see. They want to see their kids be happy, and they're going to be happy if you are.
Yes. So why do you think it's important for children to see whether it's their parents or their teachers being silly and playful?
I think that it's kind of the core of learning, because if play is what where learning stems from and where learning happens, I think if you are like, I think you have to be silly. I think you have to be loose and go with the flow, because that's sort of what is going to allow kids to have the room to, you know, I guess, learn and grow and develop. It also allows for that great connection of relationship. If the kid is seeing you get a little silly, then they'll get a little silly. And then you guys can kind of be happy together, and then you build that relationship. I also think it's important too, because, we want to show that just because you're grown up doesn't mean you have to be serious either. Like I said, if you're carrying the weight of the world, I don't want a child, any child should not have the responsibility of the weight of the world's problems on their shoulders. They should see why life is worth living.
So you kind of touched on it about social emotional development in young children. I really do believe that silliness does support social emotional development because it's about connecting with children, right? And we can connect with them on a deeper level, believe it or not, when we can get silly with them because, they feel that camaraderie with us. So tell me a little bit
Absolutely.
about how you think that silliness goes further to support social emotional development.
I mean, like, let's think about an infant room for all of you listeners who are infant teachers. One of the best games to connect with infants is like peekaboo, right? You
Yes.
disappear, you come back, they didn't know where you went, you're just behind your hands. And I think that that sort of silly play, that playfulness is where they open up and embrace, and they're learning a skill that they didn't know. They're, connecting with you. It allows for eye contact. It allows for social play, right? The parent is, or the educator is covering their face, and that's their turn, and then they open up, and that's the kid's turn to respond. So that's sort of how communication and socialization works, right? I think peekaboo is a great example. When you think about kids as they get older, nobody wants to socialize with somebody who doesn't see the light around them, right? You think about as adults, right? You don't want to talk to that negative Nancy who's not seeing fun light in their life. And so that's the thing. Children need to see that playful social aspect so that they can enter play, right? If a child's a little bit more reserved, let's say you have a shy child and they're seeing these other kids having fun, even that child who isn't ready to join into the play, they're smiling in the corner and they're watching that play happen. They're watching that socialization and turn taking and all that beautiful stuff with social skills. And then when the child shows readiness, they will embrace maybe not the large group, but maybe a peer or two, and then sort of warm into that, right? I think no matter if you're extroverted, introverted, any of that stuff, we all want to socialize. We all want to connect. We all want to find where we belong. And I think silliness kind of allows for that. You're not bringing up topics or things that might be hurtful. You're talking about fun and you're having fun, and everybody wants to have fun and smile and laugh. And so children should be exposed to that so that that's what they can anticipate in life for other people. And that's also the love that they can share for other people.
Yeah. And I think it's a point of connection, right? I mean, I definitely think that, we can connect with children when we can be silly, right? It's a point of similarity, right? Because children are generally silly a lot of the times, right? They act silly, they like having that, I always think of like a magician, right? A magician or a clown. They're super silly, like to an extreme, right? And children just, gravitate towards that. I can tell you that when I come into a classroom And, I go into a classroom every once in a while and I embrace that silly side of myself and I might say something silly or interact sillily with a child. All of a sudden I become a magnet and a bunch of children just gather around me because they are attracted to that. Like it really resonates with them and they connect with it.
Yeah, I think we could say that, like, again, I think you could even say that about adults too. I really feel like, yeah, when I come into a classroom or when I do an activity or when we're talking about, even storytelling, something that you touched upon on another one of your podcasts, what's more engaging, somebody reading the words on a paper or somebody expressing it and dramatizing it and, being able to embrace the story. And the best stories, I don't know, in my childhood, I hope for most listeners too, are those silly stories, those Robert Munch books and,
Yes.
Dr. Seuss and all of that stuff, because that's the silly, that's what our inner child, and now we're talking about actual children. They have that access to silliness. And, I often think about that movie, Inside Out by Disney. And there's
Hmm.
one scene in it, though, in the beginning of the first movie where they show the different islands of personality. And one of them is Goofball Island. And you can see the dad on it, and he's making monkey sounds. He's going like, ooh, ooh, ah, like, and the little girl is laughing and she's into it. And that's really what it is. When you think back about like your fondest, your most cherished, memories, you often think about a silly one.
Yes. Agreed. So can you share a time with me when you were embracing yourself? I probably have a lot of examples, but can you maybe think of one where that led to a meaningful connection with a child, like where you were interacting a certain way and that led to you developing a deeper bond with that child?
For sure. I think, let's say, a kindergarten age group, like I can really remember there was one child who really had a difficult time expressing themselves. They were very, leave me alone. I don't know you. I don't want to play with you. It was very kind of like very standoffish when I first started. And it was like, my first or second day. And I felt that the child really didn't want to make a connection with me. And I would make silly words up and I would like, blank a sentence. Like I would be like, this is banana crackers, even though it was soup. Okay, or whatever it was. And then that kid looked at me and started kind of laughing and tucking away their smile. And then I was like, it's not bananas and crackers. I definitely thought that's what it was. And then the child actually said, no, it's soup. You're silly. And I was like, I like to be silly. Do you like to be silly sometimes too? And then it sort of built a relationship. And by the end of the time I left that classroom, when that child left and graduated, I actually made such a deep and meaningful connection with them and with the family, because the family even told me that, it's very rare that my child makes a connection with an authority figure. So it was such a cool feeling, such a great
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. So now that we know that it's important, and we know that it helps to build connection with children, tell the listeners, if you can come up with some ways that they can bring that playful energy or that silliness into their daily routines. Like, what are some practical ways that they can do that?
Um, that's a little bit of a tough question. I'll try my best. Like when it's the stressful part of the days, and you want to make those kind of frustrational noises with yourself, you kind of want to sigh, or you just want to be like, oh, like, those kind of inner noises. I like to make those inner noises funny noises. So, instead of being like, you could be like, and then you have two kids looking at you like you're crazy. And then you just kind of keep it going. Oh, you like that sound? What else could make that sound? How about a car? What does a car do? Like, and then it sort of gets your mind distracted because you're frustrated, and being funny and seeing kids give you a positive reaction sort of takes the stress away from you too. And so that's a great way to implement the playfulness. I know we're going to touch on it too. Songs. Sometimes it's a time of day, you have a new kid in the classroom, that kid's screaming, you got another kid taking some toy from some other kid or whatever, and it's kind of chaotic in your room at that time. Sometimes you just gotta belt it. Start singing, sing a silly song. One of my favorite ones is like, wibbly wobbly woo, an elephant sat on you. And then you start saying the kids' names and somehow they're distracted and they come with you. So silly songs are a great way to incorporate silliness. Another thing is to sort of, when you're playing with a child, don't always be the adult. I think that that's really important. That sometimes we want to set up children by saying, what's the answer to this? How do you solve this? What color is this? Instead of staging and always being the adult, maybe you can allow the child to lead the conversation by you being a little funny, saying the wrong answer, doing the wrong thing. And then the child's like, Miss Amanda, we don't do that. This is how we do it. Or that's
Hmm.
not the right answer. This is the right answer. So especially with those older age groups, that's a great way to tap in. And when you're dealing with the younger age groups, you can still kind of do that in a way. One thing I like to do is like before I do a lineup outside to transition inside, often I'll be like, I'm going to do one more really, really, really fast run. Who can catch me? Who's going to reach the fence first? Right? Making those difficult transitions, from that kid who really likes playing with the bike, get off the bike and come inside instead of that tantrum and removing the child. When you get a little silly and you make it a fun game, they'll often just kind of comply and do the stuff with you.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking about transition seems like the perfect time to be silly because it is a stressful time of day, right? So you would want to think, you want to lighten the mood during those stressful moments, right? You want to lighten the mood at the time when it's difficult. And so why not be silly during a transition when you're walking from place to place or when you're getting ready to walk from place to place, right? Like, I just feel
Yeah.
like that's an opportunity to just get silly. And I think even getting silly gets children's attention, which is important during a transition. You want their eyes on you, right? You want them to follow you wherever you're going. And so the more silly you can be, the more you're going to grab their attention, the more they're going to be interested in, following you or doing what you're doing.
I
Yeah,
agree.
that's interesting.
Totally, totally. Even like the walking itself can get silly, right? You can walk backwards, you can hop, you can walk sideways, you can touch your toes and then touch the ceiling or whatever during a waiting period. You're right. That is absolutely the right time to be your inner silly. And it's also great. Like, I think another thing we didn't really touch on is new children or children adapting into the program. They need to take that stress away from missing their mom and dad or whomever is caring for them and just allow yourself to be silly and let yourself get loose and that they will then follow suit and be loose themselves. You're building a relationship and you're also setting a precedence in the classroom that it's okay to be silly and it's okay to be goofy. One thing you taught us in your self-regulation course, which I recommend, but when you were teaching us about self-reg, you taught us about not just always identifying the negative emotions, but identifying the positive ones too. Like, you like that song? Does it make you excited? Does it make you goofy? Does it make you silly? You need to let those sillies out. Let's do that together. That kind of stuff. It's so, so important because we want to make sure that children can identify, when they are happy and be able to convey that message to other people.
Awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit. And can we talk now about singing? Because I think it's definitely related to being silly. I mean, I know a lot of educators are afraid to sing, maybe because they think they don't have a great voice, or they think that it makes them look silly, especially if they don't have a great voice for singing. So, let's talk about singing in general. In my last episode, I did talk about circle time. We talked about stories and songs, but I want to go a little bit deeper this time in terms of singing, not just in circle time, but all throughout the day. What do you think it is that makes music and singing in particular such a powerful tool in early childhood? And I feel it's a dying tool that not a lot of educators are taking advantage of. So tell me a little bit about that.
I think you're absolutely right. It's something that's people are insecure about, like educators. I think that I sound like a cat that's dying when I sing. I'm I'm perfectly aware of that and I embrace that totally. Kids do not care about what the sound sounds like. They care about the connotation of the sounds. They care about the changing in your voice. They care about the up and down. They care about also, like, songs are so important to teach lessons. Songs are a natural way to teach something new. When people are learning new languages, often they'll listen to a song. That's a great way to learn some words and find the meaning of them. I think why kids like them so much is just because they're easy to follow. They're repetitive, right? Repetition and consistency is important for children's development. And I also think, yeah, because it naturally kind of taps into a little bit of a goofier and a sillier side of themselves, which is a natural attraction to the kids. And yeah, sometimes, especially for there's more difficult concepts, math concepts and language concepts, those are hard things conceptually. But a song makes it easy to follow along and be able to repeat. And here's the thing: there's no wrong way to sing. I sing with my whole chest. I sing with my diaphragm. Like, to me, music it's just another way of communication. It's one of the funnest ways to communicate. And music it just taps into everybody. Nothing makes me feel better when I'm upset than just listening to my favorite songs and screaming out the lyrics in the shower and sometimes on the street. I get some looks there, but that's always fun.
I was reminded when you were talking about the Elf movie, when he said, singing is just like talking, except you're just moving your voice up and down. Yeah, and I think of Elf and I think, how silly he was and he would sing anything and everything. Like, I remember that scene in the movie where he was told to sing a song and he just made one up in the moment. And I think singing doesn't even have to be a real song. It can be just
No.
something you make up. I know with my kids, when they were growing up, I would sing a lot of things, but I would make them up. Like, they would be mom songs that I made up just to say,
All
we're
the
going
time.
outside right now, or, you know, whatever it is we were doing, you turn it into a song, right? Just by moving your voice up and down. And
It really
yeah, it's
helps as an
powerful.
educator too. For sure, so powerful. It's really like it changes the whole tempo of the child's mood. And yeah, you're right. Those improvised songs are always my favorite. They don't rhyme, they don't make sense or have purpose. They're just there to make a better situation.
Yeah. So, why do you think it's important to sing with children rather than just to them? So, meaning that, you're singing, they're listening rather than they're singing along with us.
Oh my goodness, because they have to feel the music. They have to feel the song. They have to move with you. We want to change the atmosphere of the environment from being a negative to a positive. And the only way you're going to do that is embrace all the individuals in the environment. And not every child's going to participate, and that's okay. Some people prefer listening. Some people don't have that verbal communicative piece as well, and they have their own ways to express themselves. But yeah, I mean, it's about connection. That's why we're singing in the first place. It's about connecting and leaning on the positive, and the best way to do that is have them join you. Say those things, repeat after me. When you go to a wedding, the best part is when the DJ says, "And what's next? Hey," and then passes the mic to you, and you know the next line, and you can't wait to say it. And that changes the whole spirit and atmosphere of the environment.
Yeah, even at a concert, right?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
when they stop singing and then the audience is all singing, same
That's
thing.
always
It's
my
like that.
favorite part.
Yeah, it's like a beautiful vibe, right? Like, it's created. Yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, that would happen with kids too, right? Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what is your favorite song to sing with children and why? Do you have a
That's
favorite?
a toughie. I think I do. I'd probably say my favorite song to sing with kids has got to be the Hokey Pokey. I think it's just a classic. You have each of your body parts moving. You can add body parts. You can get silly, say things like shake your bottom, things like that, where every time I've ever sang that song ever, there's always a kid giggling at one part of the song or another. And I think that that's really why I like it. I like it because it's always silly. It's never a serious song. It's always fun. It works for multiple age groups as well. I like that you can kind of use it in any room, even for kids that don't have the full gross motor ability to put one leg in. You could just say like put your legs in or jump in. There's other ways to kind of transform the song so it's more developmentally appropriate. But I don't think I've ever seen a sour face anytime I've ever sang that song. So that's probably why it's my favorite.
For me, I think it's Head and Shoulders only because you can get silly with it, right? So, when you
Mm-hmm.
go fast or slow or, and there's movement. I love a song that has movement with it. So that to me is my favorite. And you
That's a
can do
great
it with
one.
multiple ages, right? You can do it from toddler all the way up to kindergarten.
And it actually teaches a lot of language, which is great
Yeah.
too, and is so
And
important in songs.
coordination. Okay, so to end off today, I'd love to give our educators something, a little takeaway that they can implement in their own classroom. So, what would you say is a silly song or maybe a silly game that an educator could try this week to try to bring that silliness into the classroom?
So I have like two favorites, and both I like them kind of like for the same reason. These are songs that are not super popular. One of them is called the Hooray song, and it's a song where you just say hooray for whomever, and you're just singing that over and over again. You say like hooray for Susie, hooray for Susie. Everyone in the classroom sings hooray for Susie. 1, 2, 3, 4. Who are we for? Susie, Susie, Susie. And I think when you do that simple song, it shows them patience because they're anticipating their name. It
Yeah.
builds excitement and thrill. You can use it in emotion, like when it's their time, they can jump during that song. So
Hmm.
that one's really great. Another
Yeah, I love
song
that.
I'd love to challenge people for would be it's called the Donut Song. And you sing down around the corner at the bakery shop. There were lots of little donuts with sugar on the top. Along came Susie with a penny to pay. And she took a, and you allow them to have an opportunity to pick what flavor donut they want. And then you say, and ate it away. And it's so funny because every time I've ever sang that song, I usually do it before lunch periods or waiting for our turn for something because it gets sillier as you get down. So one person says banana donut, and then another kid says rainbow sprinkle donut, and then one kid says, well, I want all the donuts. And then you have like, it just gets so creative because you give them an opportunity to give you that, they give that control, right? They have an idea. They want to express it. So those two songs are an absolute hit. They're not super popular, but I learned them many years ago and I use them all the time. It's always, always, always a great one.
Yeah, great ideas. And so those are some wonderful things that educators can try out. Sing more, sing often, get your sillies out, just like you tell children, because it'll help you to connect, right? So thank you so much for being here, Amanda, and sharing your knowledge on this topic. I think this might be, something that you're an expert in.
Oh, thank you very much for that compliment, as well as for having me. I'm absolutely just ferociously passionate about this topic. And I really hope that this podcast, all the listeners will really be inspired to, like you said, shake your sillies out, find your inner child, and just remember why we love children and why we love ourselves.
Hello, I'm back. And I just wanted to talk about the main points that we touched upon today. I had so much fun talking about being silly and talking about the importance of using silliness and songs. I know that being silly doesn't come easy for everyone, but I really do believe it is important to be silly if you plan to be an early childhood educator and a good early childhood educator. I know from my own experience, the bubbly, silly educators from my past are the ones that really stick out in my memory as really good educators. I think it's important that you be silly in order to connect with children. Children are attracted to you when you're being silly. And because of that, that's a way to help you to get their attention so that you can support their social emotional development. You can support them learning their ABCs and their numbers and all of the other cognitive skills through silliness, through fun, and through play. And songs are just as powerful as a tool for learning. You can teach anything through songs. The children learn the ABC song very easily, and they learn the letters through song, more so than if you were just to say the letters of the alphabet. So it's much easier to teach concepts like letters and numbers and science and other things through songs and through silliness. It reminds me of Bill Nye the Science Guy. And I know that whenever I watch one of those episodes, and he generally tends to try to be funny or silly, or the expressions that he has. And all of that translates because children are attracted to that, and they'll learn a science concept that might be boring otherwise, but because it's delivered with some humor and some fun and some silliness, that makes it memorable. And that is where the learning happens. So I really hope that this topic today inspired you to bring more silliness and more singing into your daily work as an early childhood educator. Thanks for tuning in to the ECE Classroom with Susie Beghin. For more information, you can visit our website at www.susiebeghin.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. Thanks for listening.